Hey everyone, my name's Chris from Create Daily, and today I'm going to show you how to make this advanced Vox-style animation using Adobe After Effects. I saw this look in a Vox video and thought it would be really fun to recreate with our own little twist. Now it's time to jump into After Effects.
So we're in After Effects here, and the first thing we're going to do is create our background. So I'm going to click Control Y, and we have this black here, and we're just going to label this BG. We're going to duplicate this, and we're going to label this grid. Now with the grid, we're going to add the grid effect right here. And we're going to change corner point to width slider. We're going to change the width to 64 and the border strength to 2. Now with this, I'm going to paste in this expression right here into the actual position of the grid itself. And it is a posterize 6 with a wiggle 100, 2. Right here is what you get. You have that jittery stop motion Vox looking aesthetic with this. So next thing we're going to do is pre-compose our grid. I'm going to right click, pre-compose, and make this grid pre. Move all attributes inside. And with any working comps, I'm just going to throw them in the working folder right here. All right, so now we have our grid and our background. The next thing we need to do is bring in our astronaut. So I have this astronaut dude right here that I masked out in Photoshop. And I'm just going to center him up and put the anchor point right here in the middle. Now what I need to do is actually create some depth, some dimension between our foreground subject, which is our astronaut, and our background, which is our grid. And the way to do that is with a 3D camera. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera. And as you can see, I'm using the standard 50mm camera right here. I'm going to click OK. Next thing I'm going to do is add a null layer. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object. I'm going to make that 3D, and I'm going to parent my camera to my null object. And just because we want to stay organized here, I'm going to label this null object as camera controller. All right, now to actually make things 3D and give it dimension, we need to make our astronaut and our grid 3D objects as well. And now to create this dimension, I'm going to go to 2 view here so you can see what I'm talking about. And I have custom view 1 pulled up. And as you can see, everything is on the same plane. So with our grid, what I'm going to do is actually push this back in Z space pretty far. So I'm going to push this back to 8,500 pixels in Z space. And you can see it's way far out there. All right, and we're going to leave our astronaut as is. So we'll go back to 1 view. I just wanted to show you guys what I was talking about with adding dimension. And to compensate for pushing things back in Z space, I'm going to need to scale this grid back up as such. So here's what we have. And next thing you know, it looks the exact same. But here's the cool thing about adding dimension and using Z space and this parallax look. When I go to the camera controller here, as I'm moving around, you see that the astronaut is moving much faster than the actual background because it is closer to the camera. So that's all part of this parallax look. And I just want you to keep that in mind when you are creating things in 3D space. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is actually do some of our 3D camera movements. So I'm gonna set a position keyframe here. I'm gonna go to about 1 second, and I'm gonna set another one right here as well. I'm gonna start in pretty tight, right here, just like that. And then it's gonna zoom out. And we are going to right click, ease out, and right click, ease in these keyframes. So here's how that looks. Nice. We're gonna let this pause for about a moment or two, and then we're gonna actually continue our camera movement by going over the astronaut's left shoulder. So I'm going to set another position keyframe here at the 3-second mark and go to 4 seconds in. And I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to keep him in frame, but he's not going to be the focal point at this point. It'll be the text. Just like that. And same thing as before, we're going to right click, ease out, right click, ease in. So things start zooming out. We reveal what we're seeing here, and then we're going to go into the actual text that we're going to be creating in a little bit. All right, the next thing we're going to do is animate our astronaut in. So I'm just going to set a position keyframe right here. And I'm going to go up, let's say 10 frames, and I'm going to set another one, and I'm going to bring this down just like such. And I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to use my flow plugin right here, and I'm going to apply the circ preset. Now I like this, but what I'm going to do is actually start off with not showing our astronaut. So he's going to kind of jump in like that. And we can mess around with the pacing. All right, this looks cool, but I want to spice things up a little bit. So I have this fun grunge looping texture right here. I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to make this 1 second long. And then I'm going to bring in our texture right here. I'm going to set a keyframe for scale, rotation, and position. Set a keyframe all at the start, go up to 8 frames, and I'm going to start moving some things around shrink it down a little bit, rotate it. We'll go up to 16 frames. Same thing. I'm going to highlight everything, right click, toggle hold keyframe, and here is what we have. So now this is just a continuous looping texture, really simple stuff. I've actually created other tutorials on how to animate and loop textures if you are interested in checking those out. So now I'm going to go back to our render comp here, and we have our looping texture, which I will bring into our working folder, and I'm going to plop this on top. And what I'm going to do is parent it to our astronaut. I'll make it 3D, and I'm also going to mat it to our astronaut too. So here is what we have. We have this fun little flash, which looks pretty cool. And I'm going to scale the size of our texture just to make sure it covers everything here. So now that we have this fun little kind of moon rock looking texture showing our dabbing astronaut, now I actually want to reveal our astronaut itself. So I'm going to duplicate our astronaut layer, and I'm going to put that on top. And what I'm going to do is a simple mask animation. So I'll go out to where we see the full astronaut, and I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to click M for mask path, and I'm going to go back 2 keyframes, and I'm going to bring our mask down. Go down 2 more keyframes. I'm going to continue the process, 2 more. Boom. And this is kind of like this weird linear wipe looking thing, and the cool thing, the thing that I really like about the Vox-style look is that because it's a lot more like stop motion-y, we're actually going to get rid of these linear keyframes. So I'm going to highlight them, right click, and do toggle hold keyframe, so it's a little skippy just like that. And then next thing I'm going to do here is highlight all of our keyframes, and I'm going to bring it right in here. So now we have our astronaut moonrock thing kind of animated, followed by the actual astronaut himself. So we don't need to show our looping texture or moonrock astronaut anymore. So I'm going to click Alt and bracket here. That way it's just the actual astronaut himself. All right, this looks good so far. Now what we need to do is continue our animation. So I'm going to create a fun little blob. So I'm going to pull up our ellipse tool, and I'm going to just collapse everything, and I'm going to create this circle. I'm going to get rid of our stroke, and I'm going to create a fill, and we will make this, we can make this any color we want, and we could change it later. So I'm just going to start off with yellow since it's bright, and we will label this blob. I'm going to make it 3D, put it below our camera. So the whole thought process behind this is you want to lead the viewer's eye, and I think of it like how we read, left to right. I'm going to start off by bringing the blob in to the left side of the frame. I'm going to put the blob on top of the astronaut because that's what I want them to focus on for that moment. Then afterwards, I'm going to use the blob to guide the viewer's eye to over the astronaut's shoulder. And we're going to do all of that with motion. To start, I'm going to bring our blob over here. And what I want to do is set a position keyframe. Come in. Bring it up top. Like such. As you remember, we have that additional camera movement. So eventually we're going to need that blob to actually make its way back here too. So then I'm going to get this blob and move it back just like that. So here's what we have so far. And this looks a little weird and a little boring, so we're going to spice this up. Don't worry. All right, so what I'm going to do is click on our keyframes here, click F9 to easy ease. The blob kind of stops right here in the middle, and what I want is for that motion to continue onwards. So it's really easy to fix that. I'm going to click on our keyframes here, go to our graph editor. I'm going to bring up our handles right here. Whenever it is at 0, that's when it's going to be at a complete stop. So as long as we have the handles lifted, the motion will continue onwards just like that. So here's what we have right now with the blob. And what I want to do is actually smooth out some of this motion even a little bit further. So we have our path right here. And as you see, these are straight lines. I'm actually going to add a Bezier handles to these curves, just because that way we have a little bit more curvature and just a little bit more fluidity within our motion itself. The small change is going to make a massive difference. And as you see, it goes in, it slows down a little bit, and then it keeps going forward. So just making small changes like that is going to make a huge difference when animating your blob. Now what I need to do is actually stylize our blob a little bit. I don't like how it comes in straight from the start like that. I kind of want it to come in from nowhere. So I'm going to cut off the first bit of the layer by pressing Alt in bracket, just like that. So here's what we have. Nice. Now to actually make it look blobby, I'm going to add a turbulent displace right here. And what I'm going to do is set the amount to 20, the size to 50, and then I'm going to animate the evolution here by holding down Alt, clicking on the stopwatch, and typing in time *200. And right away, now we have this blob looking thing right here, and it's continuously animating. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is create and animate our text. So I'm just going to hide our blob layer for now, and what I'm going to do is write in our text the first dab ever on space creates world peace. What a headline. I'm going to highlight all this, hold down Alt, and use my arrow keys to kind of work through the spacing of some of these lines. All right, I like that. And I'm going to change some of the placement here. I need to make this a 3D layer because that's how we're going to be able to see where this is going to be properly placed. Now I have this text here, but everything is still on the same plane because the astronaut is at 0. So now what I actually need to do is put the text between the astronaut and the grid background. To do that, I'm going to click P, and I'm going to start pushing things back just a little bit, and I'm going to adjust the placement of everything. We'll scale things down a little bit too. All right, so now it's clearly behind the astronaut, but we need to actually have it animate in. And we're gonna do a simple typewriter type of animation. So I'm gonna go to the top here, and I'm going to go to Animate, Opacity. And with that, I'm going to set the opacity to 0. I'm gonna go to Range Selector here. I'm gonna go to Start, and then go up 12 keyframes. Actually, we'll go up the full second. And then I'm going to bring everything in just like that. So here's what we have. All right, this is getting better. Now what I need to do is actually go down to Advanced. I need to change the smoothness to 0, so it's a little bit more jumpy. All right, and then I need to change from characters to words. So now we're gonna get that typewriter look. And what I might actually do is even extend out the duration of this text animation just to let it breathe a little bit more. Perfect. And now I'm going to highlight our keyframes and click F9. We have our blob coming in, our astronaut, and now we have our text. But our blob is covering our text, and we don't want that. And it looks a little too large, so how do we fix that? Well, everything is in Z space, as you remember. So when I go down to our blob here, if I were to put things behind the astronaut, now we're hiding it. So we go from seeing it, and then it kind of cuts through, and it looks a little bit abrupt. So we're going to cheat this a little bit. I'm going to hold down Shift S for scale. And what I'm going to do is find where the blob really starts to leave the astronaut, which is right around here. I'm going to set a keyframe, and then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to shrink down the size of this blob. At the same time, I'm going to realign some of the positioning that we had originally placed. And to make things a little bit more fluid, what I'm going to do is actually go and see if I can align these scale keyframes up with our camera controller, and so it just looks a little bit more natural. So in this case, we're actually faking the 3D because everything is still in the same plane, meaning the blob and the astronaut. But because I don't want it to go through the astronaut, I'm just going to use this little workaround to still make it look like it's in 3D space. All right, this is looking great so far. The next thing we're going to do is create some fun elements to bring our text to life. So we're going to create a fun little circle to go around the first dab, and then we're going to create a fun little highlighter effect to go around world peace. So to do that, I'm going to pull out my pen tool here, and I'm going to create a stroke. We'll make it the same color as our highlighter. With our stroke, I'm going to bring this down to, let's say, 10. And I'm going to set a point here and create a fun, simple circle, just like this. Awesome. Now with our shape, I'm going to label this as circle. Now I'm going to stylize it a little bit. So I'm going to go down to contents here, go down to shape, go down to stroke, go down to taper, and we're going to change our start length to, let's say, 8, and our end length to around 11. And now what I'm going to do is add a trim paths, and I'm going to bring our end keyframe to 0, and I'm going to go up about a second or so and animate it in just like that. Now we need to make this 3D as well. So what I'm going to do is get our circle, make it 3D, and I can't recall what our parameters were for the text, so I'm just going to see, okay, I'm going to copy these parameters and paste it right on top of the circle. And then with that, I'm just going to move our circle around a little bit. And if I want, I could still make additional changes to our circle. Say I wanted to kind of drag out a little bit further like that. Perfect. So here's what we have. All right, I like the way this looks. Now I actually want to get rid of the circle. I just want to show it for a second. So what I'm going to do is go back to our trim paths here, and I'm going to set a keyframe for the start, and I'm going to go up about a second or so and set another keyframe right here. And I'm actually going to line up these keyframes just a little bit more and ease them. That looks good. Now it's time to actually create the fun highlighter effect. So what I'm going to do is duplicate our text, and I'm going to change it to black. And we won't be able to see it much because our background's black. So I'm just going to get rid of our background. so we could see. Now, what I need to do to reveal the text as black like this is we're going to create this fun highlighter effect. So now what I'm going to do is take out my pen tool. I'm going to create a bigger stroke. Let's say make it 30. I'm going to select a point here and a point right here. Bring this up a little bit bigger. We're going to label this highlighter. I'm going to make it 3D. And then I'm going to paste the parameters from the text onto the highlighter. And I actually need to push it back slightly so we can see it. Perfect. I'm going to go over here to world piece, continue making some adjustments just so everything fits right. And then what I'm going to be doing is same as before with the circle. I'm going to be pulling up our trim paths here, and I'm going to be pasting it onto our highlighter, just like that. But the only difference with this is that I actually want to keep it on. So I'm going to get rid of our start keyframe. So it's going to stay on the entire time, just like that. So now what I need to do to actually show this and have the text fit inside the highlighter itself is we have this text, which I'm going to label black text, and our original, which I will just label white text. I'm going to matte our black text to our highlighter. So only the things that are shown in the highlighter will be seen. So here's how that looks. And we can even offset things a little bit if we want. We could pull this up so the highlighter comes in first and then the text animates on. Just like that. So now when I pull up our white text and go back to showing everything, here's what we have. All right, so here's our animation so far, and things are looking good, but now it's time for the fun stuff, the sauce. So let me show you how to really spice this up and make this really unique to you and that box looking style. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to change our background color. Before I had it to this black, just to make it stand out, but I want it to actually look more like a gray. So I'm going to change it to 21, 21, 21, just like that. So it has more of that grayish feel. I'm going to change our blob blend mode from normal to screen, just so it blends in a little bit more too. That looks nice. All right, and now what I want to do is actually stylize our astronaut a little bit. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to add a levels effect, and I'm going to make things a little bit brighter. And just make it a little bit more contrasty. And I'm going to add a tritone effect. And I'm going to make some adjustments with this as well. Nice, that looks good. Next thing I'm going to do is adjust the pacing of things. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to label this Posterize. And I'm going to add a Posterize Time effect and make it 12. So now things start to look a little bit choppier, and this is how it looks. It gets really choppy. So the next thing we're going to do is add a fun camera lens blur just to give our animation just a little bit more of anticipation between camera movements. So I'm going to duplicate our Posterize Time effect. I'm going to label this camera lens blur. And I'm going to get rid of our Posterize Time effect and add the effect. And what I'm going to do is make some slight adjustments between keyframes to give it just a little bit of focus breathing right before we go into the second part of the animation. So I'm going to set a keyframe, go down 4 keyframes here, set another one. I'm going to repeat the process a few times. All right, so here's what we have so far. We have everything coming in, and then now we have this slight camera lens blur with this Posterize Time adjustment layers, and it just makes things look so much better already. All right, the next thing we're going to do is stylize our background grid just a little bit more, because I think there's a lot more we can do with that background. So I'm going to duplicate our grid here. I'm going to go in, and now I'm going to change the color of the solid from black to white. I'm going to get rid of our grid effect, and I'm going to add this effect called CC Ball Action. I'm going to change the size to 34. Just like that. So now we have all of these little balls here, kind of like you would see like really up close on like a TV screen or something like that. So that's the kind of look that we're going for. And we will relabel this to ball action. Now what I want to do is create some fun shape layers going from left to right. And what we're going to do is have this kind of background animation going over the grid, and then we're going to overlay it on top. It's going to look really sweet. If that sounds like a lot, just stick with me. So to keep things moving, I'm just going to show you guys what I did to make this work. So remember how we created that highlighter effect before? I used 2 different points, and I went from one spot to the other, and I animated the end and start point using a trim path. So I'm doing the same thing right here. All I'm doing now is that I actually added a turbulent displace. You see my settings right here. And then with the evolution, I just did time * 100. Really simple stuff. And that was just to keep things moving as it's moving along right here. And then what I did after that is I duplicated it, 2 other times, and then I offset them. So now when we look at everything all together, here's how that looks. All the layers are the exact same, they just come in at different times. The other thing I did is add a Posterize Time effect, and I made this one 8, so it's even more choppier than our original comp, which is set at 12. And with that, I'm going to take all of these shapes, I'm going to duplicate them, and then I'm going to bring them up top, space it out by a second, do the same thing, and repeat this process. So now we have all these different shapes coming in just like that, and it looks really random, really unique. It's just a different look. Now what I want to do is actually highlight all of our shapes here, and I'm going to matte them to our ball action. So now all we see is the ball action, just like this. So now things are starting to really look very unique compared to how they did originally with our grid layer. I'm going to go back into our render comp, and I'm going to duplicate our grid. And now I'm going to bring in our second grid, hold down Alt, and drag that right on top. So now, with just a click of a button, now we have this animated grid following by the CC ball action. All right, now there are a few more things I want to do to stylize this. All right, and what I'm going to do with this grid right here is I'm actually going to add an RGB split. I have this plugin by Red Giant, so I'm able to just automatically do that. There are plenty of tutorials out there to do an RGB split if you don't have a plugin for that. That's just going to give it a little bit of stylization. In addition to that, I'm going to add a deep glow. Deep glow is going to make things really pop and look really cool, and I love that. I'm going to change the exposure to 0.4 just so it doesn't overpower the actual animation. And I'm actually going to copy the same RGB split, and I'm going to paste it onto our original grid as well. So now we have this continuous RGB look. All right, so we are in space, right? So I think we should add some stars. So we're going to add that next. So what I'm going to do is duplicate our background. I'm going to go to Layer, Solid Settings, change this to white so we can see what we're working with. And I'm going to just solo this so we only see this layer. I'm going to add a CC Starburst effect, and we are going to label this layer Starburst. Now I'm going to modify these settings just to make things look a little bit better. So for our grid spacing, I'm going to change it to 2. For our size, I'm going to change it to 50. For our scatter, I'm going to change this to 675. And then for our speed, I'm going to change this to 0.05. That way it's very subtle and it moves very slowly throughout the entire time. And you could always play around with these settings. These are just the settings I found to be useful for this particular example. All right, so here's what we have so far. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is actually add some grain. So I'm going to go to Composition, New. We're gonna label this Grain Pre, and we're going to make this 10 seconds long. I'm going to create a solid. We're gonna change the color here to 80, 80, 80. We're going to add the Add Grain effect. We're gonna change the preview to Final Output, Preset. We'll do this Kodak preset here. We're going to change the intensity to 1.2, the size to 1.3, and then the actual animation itself to like 0.3. And then next thing we're gonna do is actually add a tint effect so everything is black and white. Now we're gonna go back to our render comp here, and we're gonna throw this grain right on top of everything besides the adjustment layers. We're gonna change the blend mode to overlay, and we're going to drop the opacity here to, let's say, 30. That's just gonna make things look a little bit grainier, a little bit more natural. All right, so the last bit of sauce we're gonna add is some focus animation going in from the wide shot to the text itself and where everything else is going to be out of focus. So what we're going to do here is go to our camera here, and we're going to go to camera options. We're going to turn depth of field on, and I'm going to go to 2 view so we can see what we're looking at here. And I'm going to set a keyframe for focus distance, and I'm going to go towards the end of our camera animation. And now I'm looking for our text. Now I know our text is right around here, and we'll change this 2 view to top so we can really see what we're looking at. So our text is right here. What I need to do is adjust our focus distance, which is right here, to our text. So I'm just taking this line and I'm just moving it up top, just like that. And I'm just adjusting this right up top here. Perfect. And I'm just making sure that it is in line with where we want our focus to be. This is a little tedious, but the final look actually really does pay off. All right, and then what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to go back to 2 view, and I want to make sure that our focus distance is set on the astronaut because that's our focal point for right then and there. Nice. And then I'm going to boost up our aperture. And here's what we have, and I love doing animations like this because the opportunities truly are endless. I could add more RGB splits, I could add more animations with the camera, more text, we can go to another scene. I mean, there's so much more you can do. So I hope you got some really nice takeaways from today's tutorial, and this is how you create a fun Vox looking animation using Adobe After Effects.
I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Thanks for watching and stay creative.